Now for the bushing. I can't get all my pushing plates in there. So what I'm going to do, I put a piece of flat steel in. I've got that cone, large cone. And I'm going to try to bring this in as tight as I can. And maybe I can do something from there. If I can't, I'll get the air chisel out and I'll cut that out. I'll give this a try first. Well, that went relatively smooth. After I pushed it in with a plate, like I said I was going to do with that piece of flat steel, I just took the, what is this, a 35 millimeter socket for the same one that on the axle nut. And then I continued to push it through, beat it through. I know it's hard on the gear, but it didn't take much really. The only thing it's tight right there, so I had to punch this back out. It was in, not hard, but enough you couldn't pull it out by hand, but I just punched it out. And yeah, and this is the old bushing. Let's get the new one in now. So I cleaned up the bore with a little bit of emery cloth right here. Just cleaned it up in here, and I'll put a little bit of grease on it, just a skin or some oil or something to give it a little lube. And I'm using this Moog bushing. That's the part number right there. K200 183 bushing kit. All it is in there is just the bushing, the same as it came out, but it's new. So let's get set up and we'll pull that in with that bushing installer. Well, that didn't go the way I planned it. The problem I have with that ball joint bushing installer is not long enough. And these are not flat, these areas. There's a couple little tabs that are flat right there. But since my C-clamp wasn't long enough, and I don't have a long bolt, like a long threaded rod to pull it through. I could have, if I had a nice piece of threaded rod to come through, I could have mounted on this side and I could have pulled this in. It didn't go in that hard. So what I ended up doing, using my sledgehammer and my brass drift, and I end up pounding it in. You do bend this up a tiny bit, but it's in where it should be. I checked the other side. You can't get this right flush. Well, you could, but it doesn't need to be because it's down tight on the bottom. And there's some play on the forks on these things. Anyway, the bushing's in. So now I'm going to assemble the strut assembly with the lift piece on it. And that means putting the fork on. I have to get that fork off first, get that fork off, and then get the new strut assembly, and then mount the lift on it, the 2-inch lift on top, and then it'll go up in there. But first I have to put the axle in. We've got the yoke swapped over on the strut, and now let's put the 2-inch lift on it. I get one dug out here. One of these guys. I think they're both the same. All right, let me get it out. There it is, the lift mounted. In the instructions it says to trim these back, but I think they're talking about the 1-inch lift, because they make they make more than just one, but so the one set of instructions covers them all, but with the 2-inch you didn't have to. Fit snug are on the studs, and a lot of it was just, you know, wrenching it down from side to side. It went down pretty good. You think about it, like this is an aftermarket manufacturer here, and this is an aftermarket manufacturer here, and they came that close, so they could fit without too much hassle. That's pretty remarkable. All right, that's all put together. Now this goes up in the car once I get the axle in. Now I want to point out one thing with these lift kits. I've got all this in, lift kit in, it's all in. I've got the fork bolts back in, but you have to, well, I had to, maybe someone else can do it, but because the angle of the shaft itself will only go so far, I had to remove, this shaft was out anyway because I was replacing it, as you know, but on the other side I did the same thing. The shaft had to come out in order to put the fork back in the lower control arm when using these lift kits. So once you get the fork on and the shaft sitting there, and you have to put it on because it won't go through the fork, the new shaft. So you have to have the fork off to get the shaft in there. So resting it on the control arm, And then you can get the, over there, the hub assembly and the bracket, the carrier rather, and then put it on down on underneath, bring it up from the bottom, and then put the vehicle down, or jack, if you're on the ground already, jack it up so you bring up the whole system so you have enough clearance to get that shaft back in. It's a bit fiddly, but it can be done. It's not a big deal. The fiddly to get the shaft back in the hub, the wheel hub assembly, but the other side went well. It's just a matter of getting it down and jacking it up. In my case, I just lowering it down on the jack, and then I can adjust it from the jack. So that's what I'm going to do. Now it's on. I'm not fond of how this happened, how I got that jack to lift up that lower control arm. Because when I started, the control arm was on quite a grade slope. Jack slid a couple times over. So that's the only thing I can say about this process. You got to be very careful with. Not that you're probably going to get hurt because you're back at the jack end, but until you can get the jack to fit level on this, to put this control arm, I'll show you. You put this this hub on and everything, and hub assembly and bracket in order to get it on the upper control arm. The jacking is a bit sketch. That's all I'm saying. So I started way back here. Where's my finger? I started way back at this beginning that slid out until it leveled up enough. So just be careful when you're doing that. Other than that, it's pretty good. Yeah, I just don't like doing that kind of thing. But you're not going to get hurt because you're way back at the jack end. And once you get it up there, and as long as it's leveled out, it's not going to go anywhere. But once you get it bolted up in there, it's good. It's not going to hurt anything. But it seems like you have to kind of do that in order to get that shaft to go all the way out. It's all in now. New shaft is in. It's seated into the housing, the front diff. The extension's all the way out. Everything's free there now. I mean, it's no big deal. But if you jack on here, it just wants to keep pushing this away so you can't get it in. And I think that's even more dangerous than doing that, because now you're forcing something after you have it jacked up. So this isn't bad as long as you stay out of this area. That's all I'm saying while you're jacking. If it slips, you could damage this axle shaft, I guess. But just be careful. All right, here we go. I found a little better way of doing that bushing install. I just got a large bolt, and I should have just got a piece of 5/8 threaded rod, because if you had a piece of 5/8 threaded rod, you could nut it on both sides and suck it in with a socket or something that would fit on the same size. There'd be no hammering. But anyway, this worked fine. Just a 5/8 bolt. It fits through the bushing, keeps it centered somewhat, and then you're pounding on the head of the bolt, not the socket. So this is my better way of doing it, since my bushing installer won't reach over that. There, I've been working on the back a little bit. I hadn't done this before, so I just wanted to go ahead and see how it goes. The back is pretty straightforward, unlike the front. So on the back, you have this spacer, and there's this snubber bumper. You pull the snubber bumper out. There's a rubber for the spring mount, insulator, spring insulator, and underneath where the bumpers fit is a cup, and inside the cup is a bolt, and that bolts into the chassis up here. So you take that all out. The rubber snubber just pulls out. You got to pry on it a little bit, but it'll pop out. And they supply a new bolt, and it goes through the whole thing. It pulls the cup up inside. So now you can put the rubber insulator back on, and the snubber. The spring, if you won't be able to get it back in if you don't drop the upper arm off, this lateral support arm. So you have to drop that off. You take the caliper off, the stabilizer link, and if you're going to do this, you might as well do that up front. I'm only doing one side at a time. The other side's still all attached, and also the shock has to come off. So the shock first, probably caliper, you know what I mean. So when you put it all back in, you're gonna have to use a jack or something. I'm on a hoist, so I'll lower it down and then jack it back up into place, put all that stuff back on. And that's pretty much it. The back is easy. The front wasn't that easy. Lifts in, new shocks. There's the 2-inch lift in the back, new shocks, both sides. I must say that the passenger side rear lift was much simpler than the driver's side rear. New shock. I only had to drop that control link off. Here we are up in here. Got the spare tire back up where she belongs. The link's all hooked up. Looks good there. And the front of these ones here, like I said before, these are a bit difficult. Difficult, but not difficult. It's time consuming, but I had a lot going on here with this one because I had to put a new axle shaft in it. Right here, I had to put a new axle shaft in it. And I had to put new bushings because I couldn't get those forks off. So this had a lot going on. Like I said, the only thing in this, you kind of have to, there's not enough clearance in the fork right between here, bottom of the strut, and the shaft to have the shaft in place while you're trying to get the fork on. It binds there. You might be able to do it. I couldn't do it without worrying about damaging something. So I had the jack up on the bottom as you saw. Skid plate's back on. So she's looking good. So I'll put her back down on the ground and torque the wheels. And then we'll put her out front and do a comparison from the video or the picture I took at the beginning of the video.